Hurry up! This is Chernobyl, not a walk in the park. The radiation is very high. We have to find shelter. Follow me.
Wow, you look really radiant today. Welcome to the Reactor 4 of the Vladimir Ilyich Lenin Nuclear Power Plant, or simply Chernobyl Power Plant. We are in the former Ukrainian SSR, close to the city of Pripyat, city of Chernobyl, and only 16 kilometers or 10 miles from the Belarus border. Here, on the 26th of April 1986, on Saturday, 2 seconds before 1:24 a.m., one of the world's nuclear disasters happened. Actually, the disasters reaching maximum severity on the international nuclear event scale were only 2 in the history of mankind. This and Fukushima in Japan in 2011. Chernobyl plant began to be built in 1970 along with the mentioned city of Pripyat, where the workers lived and were, fun fact, the average age of people living there was 26 years old. Chernobyl had 4 RMBK 1000 reactors that together produced about 10% of Ukraine's electricity. The last one of them, reactor number 3, was shut in 2000. So, Chernobyl, despite its problems, had quite a run. There were 2 more reactors, number 5 and number 6, that were under construction but were eventually cancelled in 1989. RMBK stands for Reactor Bolshoi Moshnosti Kanalny, high power channel type reactor, and is a solely Soviet faulty design. It would be impossible to build this in any other place that had any regard for human life. But the Soviet doctrine since World War II was Nas mnoho, there is plenty of us, basically meaning that people are disposable. Only the final effect counts. RMBK is a reactor where graphite acts as a moderator. Each of them produced 1000 megawatts of electric power. The main difference between this reactor and those used in the West, or on the good side of the Iron Curtain, is the fact that they were low budget, used cheaper, low enriched uranium. Some could even run on natural uranium. RMBK has control rods that had a design flaw. This control rod had 2 parts, one made of boron to decrease chain reaction and one made of graphite to increase it. It played a key role in the disaster. Basically, it is as if you had your car's brake and acceleration in one pedal. To brake, you had to accelerate for a second. And Soviets knew about it, since this positive scrum effect occurred in 1983 in Ignalina nuclear power plant. But the most distinctive feature of RMBK reactor is the fact that you could disconnect any safety or automatic system and do everything by hand. This "I know better" mentality is another factor that led to the disaster. There are 10 RMBKs that are still running, and the last one will be shut down in 2050. So, humanity, brace yourself. The whole kaboom was caused by so many factors that it seems it was planned. The main cause was the test of the reactor number 4 cooling system when the power is low. Meaning, could the reactor cool itself when there was a power problem? The test was planned on the 25th of April 1986. There were some flaws in the reactor design that were to be fixed. In order to do so, a series of tests had been already conducted. Previous tests from 1982, 84 and 85 had ended unsuccessfully. The test required disabling of some safety systems. And as you already know, with RMBK, you could do what you wanted. There were 3 shifts working on the plant: day shift, evening, and night shift. The test was to be conducted by the day shift. Meanwhile, at 2 p.m., some other power station went offline, so lowering the power in the reactor needed for the test was postponed. Because, people needed electricity, especially in the evening. The day shift was replaced by the evening shift. No one even bothered to restore the emergency core cooling system. An hour before midnight, the test was finally greenlit from Kiev. Despite the fact that the evening shift was preparing to leave and the night shift had an hour to take over, the test was resumed. In theory, this test should run its course like this. The test is finished during the day shift, and the night shift maintains the decay heat cooling system in a basically shut down plant. But now, an unprepared operating shift was on duty, and they didn't have much time to prepare for the test. There were 3 people that conducted it: Anatoly Dyatlov, Deputy Chief Engineer of the entire Chernobyl nuclear plant. He supervised it. Serving under Dyatlov was Alexandra Kimov, Chief of the Night Shift. And finally, Leonid Toptunov, an operator of the movement of the control rods. He was very young and had worked there for only about 3 months. As I said, the experiment was to see if the reactor can produce enough power to cool itself with water turbine when it is in a low power state. The reactor was running low power the whole day in preparation for the test that accumulated xenon-135 that hampers nuclear reaction even more. They had a reactor that was simply switching off, so they systematically extracted the control rods to raise power. Eventually, they manually extracted nearly all of the 211 control rods, leaving only 18 of the minimum of 28 fail-safe rods. The power started to rise rapidly, water to boil, alarms and warning lights to flicker, but they still continued with the experiment. Why? The 1st of May was too close. The 1st of May, the International Workers' Day, today's Labor Day, it's like communist Thanksgiving, the most important holiday of the year. The promotions were given and successful completion of the test would have ensured that. As you see, also the date couldn't have been worse. I will not bore you with the chemical physical details, but to prevent complete switch-off of the reactor and later maintain the power level, too many control rods were extracted, which made the reactor unstable. To cool the core, an increased water flow was induced, but it was too fast, so it didn't cool itself, not to mention the core. They raised the power just to turn it down for the sake of the test. At 1:23:04 a.m. on 26th of April, the test began. The steam to the turbines was shut off in order to decrease the power for the reactor cooling pumps. That caused formation of steam voids, bubbles, in coolant flowing through the reactor. In this type of reactor, boiling water induces chain reaction in the core. The power in the reactor rose uncontrollably, causing more water to boil, and this caused more chain reaction, causing even more water to boil, and so on. The xenon hampering the reaction was at this time long gone. Nothing was controlling the reaction. 36 seconds after the test began, a scrum button was pressed to switch off the reactor. This caused the system to insert all control rods into the reactor and rapid increase in power, which subsequently increased steam buildup and finally steam pressure. The control rods traveled slowly, about 20 seconds through the core, and there was the accelerate before brake phenomenon because of the graphite tips. It is not clear who decided to press scrum button, since the only people who could do it, Akimov and Toptunov, died several days later due to lethal doses of radiation they received. At the time of the first explosion, 18 seconds after pressing the button, it is estimated that the reactor ran at 30,000 megawatts, 10 times more than it was designed to. The steam explosion ripped the reactor's casing and blew up its metal lid. The other, even more powerful explosion occurred 2 to 3 seconds later. It is speculated that it was the hydrogen from the water that caused it. The second boom threw many of the flaming graphite bricks from the bottom of the reactor to the roof of the plant. The roof, due to low cost, was covered with combustible bitumen, and bitumen or asphalt is a form of petroleum. So a fire broke, and radioactivity was spreading all around. Could it be worse? Yes. Despite the reactor's core was now bare and melting, the engineer conducting the experiment, Akimov, still considered the situation is manageable. At first, he didn't even believe that the reactor could have gone off. At this point, one person lost his life. It was engineer Valery Khodemchuk, who died during the explosion and whose body was never found. Just before 2 a.m., first firefighters from Chernobyl arrive at the scene. We have flames from the hole in the building and bricks of graphite laying around. At first, firefighters are unaware of the situation and pick them up by hand. They have no masks to filter radioactive dust. Some of them quickly start to show signs of nuclear exposure, vomiting, nosebleeds, burns. Some say that they can taste metal. Many of them will die very soon. At the same time, Akimov, despite having proof of nuclear fuel laying around, blatantly refuses to acknowledge the gravity of the situation. The readings from dosimeters are treated as defective. Akimov orders his crew to pump water into the reactor. They had nuclear tan, and nearly all of them, including Akimov, died soon after the disaster. Dyatlov showed symptoms of radiation sickness after 3 hours and was replaced by chief engineer Nikolai Fomin. A lethal dose of radiation is around 500 Röntgens over 5 hours, circa 5 sieverts per 5 hours, which is 5000 millisieverts per 5 hours, and we will stay with sieverts. In some areas, unprotected workers received fatal doses within few minutes. Nearby the reactor core, there was 300 sieverts per hour. In the area of the destroyed reactor, the radiation reached 10-15 sieverts per hour. Those exposed to radiation were transported to Pripyat Hospital and eventually treated in Soviet Health Ministry's Hospital number 6 in Moscow. In most cases, the treatment was futile. The dead were buried in zinc coffins and covered with concrete due to enormous radiation their bodies emitted. Surprisingly, Dyatlov survived, despite the radiation he received. Those who survived had many health problems, skin grafting and cancer included. Water was not enough to extinguish fires. Moreover, it later caused a serious problem. In the first days, helicopters dropped sand, clay, lead, and neutron-absorbing boron onto the burning reactor. Approximately 600 Soviet pilots risked their lives flying over the reactor. The reactor's temperature was more than 1200 centigrades, almost 2200 Fahrenheit. Underneath, there was a mass built of graphite and fuel which burned through the reactor floor and mixed with molten concrete coming from the reactor lining. It all formed corium lava, or just corium, a very radioactive mass which flowed into the basement of the reactor. Beneath the basement, there were bubbler pools, water reservoirs, a safety backup in case some steam pipe breaks. And here is the problem. Water from firefighting accumulated there. Corium plus water equals explosion, throwing new masses of radioactive materials into the air. The valves to drain those pools were in the basement underwater. 3 volunteers from the Chernobyl staff, equipped with wetsuits, respirators and dosimeters, managed to release the valves. They all survived, and the risk of the steam explosion was eliminated. Then fire brigade pumped out the water, the task which was completed on the 8th of May. The reactor fire was extinguished 2 days earlier. But Soviets didn't release any credible info about the disaster to the world, not to mention their own citizens. Here is an invitation for Ukrainian children to participate in the International Workers' Day, Labor Day. Of course, the most important party members and their children were long gone from the area. That is terrifying because the 1st May parades on the International Workers' Day in Kiev and other cities were not cancelled. The reactor still constituted a problem as the core kept melting through the construction. Chernobyl power plant is placed on wetlands. Under the plant there was groundwater which feeds into the Pripyat River, and Pripyat River feeds into the Dnieper. Contamination of water was imminent. Another action had to be done. The 13th of May 1986, 450 coal miners came to excavate a 150-meter, about 500 feet long tunnel below the reactor to make room for a cooling system. The excavation was then filled with concrete to strengthen the foundation below the reactor. The miners worked in 3-hour shifts for 36 days until they finally secured the reactor. The following years, 170 of them died. Was it due to radiation? Probably. Temperature and humidity made it very hard for them to wear any protective gear during the work. Soviets didn't put the first man on the moon, but they certainly put the first lunar rover on the roof of a nuclear power plant. There were many tons of radioactive debris on that roof that came from the explosion. It had to be removed to enable the safe construction of the sarcophagus, a structure made of concrete that would be placed over the reactor and would reduce radioactivity released into the atmosphere. At first, they used remote-controlled machinery, but radiation is devastating for electronics, so they quickly realized that even space equipment is quickly fried. You remember Nas Mnoho, there is many of us doctrine? 5,000 soldiers called biorobots, who wore improvised protective gear, shoveled blocks of graphite and other debris off the roof. One shift due to immense radiation lasted less than a minute. As you see, not many realize the gravity of their situation. All those brave men were called liquidators. The miners, pilots, soldiers, plant workers, engineers, those who built sarcophagus, chopped radioactive trees, washed buildings, streets, bulldozed villages, and even killed animals to prevent radiation from spreading. Their number varies to approximately 600,000 of them, actively combating fallout. Many of them without gear, dosimeters, totally unprepared for the task they were handed. These emergency workers received high doses of radiation. An estimated average dose was 165 millisieverts.
Внимание, внимание! Внимание, внимание! Внимание, внимание! Уважаемые товарищи!
It took 36 hours from explosion to evacuation of the inhabitants of Pripyat. The radioactive cloud started to form, and you can even see it on this film taken a day after explosion. Those flashes are radioactivity destroying photographic film, a phenomenon applied in simple dosimeters used by radiologists in hospitals. The radiation was so high that some people had symptoms of radiation poisoning, vomiting, headaches. Despite army planes flying over, strange trucks washing streets, there was no official information passed to people about what is happening. The evacuation of 50,000 people started in the afternoon of April 27th, 1986. That is way before neighboring countries even learned about the explosion. People of Pripyat were told that evacuation is for 3 days only. So there was no need to take all their belongings. There are furnished flats and houses with everyday items to this day. Pets had to be left behind. Of course, people never returned and poor animals were executed by special squads. The iconic Ferris wheel in the Pripyat amusement park was never even officially used, since its opening was scheduled on the 1st May celebrations. Several people stayed. Those were either liquidators or plant workers. Some buildings stayed open for those allowed to stay. Imagine that another iconic building, the Azure swimming pool, remained open and in use until 1998, for 12 years after the disaster. At the beginning, the exclusion zone had a radius of 10 kilometers, 6.2 miles, but in May it was tripled and another 68,000 people were evacuated. But this 30 kilometers, 19 miles zone called Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant Zone of Alienation or Chernobyl Exclusion Zone was in later years expanded, leading to more evacuations.
От Совета министров СССР.
An official announcement from the Council of Ministers. There has been an accident at the Chernobyl atomic power station. One of the atomic reactors was damaged. The consequences of the accident are being taken care of. Help is being given to the victims of the accident. A government commission has been set up.
I already told you that Soviets kept the disaster even from their citizens, not to mention the world. But 2 days after the reactor 4 had gone off, the Swedish workers of Forsmark nuclear power plant, located more than 1,300 kilometers, more than 800 miles from Chernobyl power plant, detected radioactive particles on their clothing. Sweden checked its reactors for leaks and didn't find any. It was obvious that the source of radiation is from USSR. Under international pressure, Soviets admitted to malfunction of the Chernobyl reactor, but lied the very same day, April the 28th, that situation is under control. It was a few days before the reactor fire would be even extinguished not to mention the risks of additional explosions. It wasn't until the information about mass evacuations reached the world that seriousness of the disaster was obvious. For example, Soviets scrambled signal of Radio-Free Europe, preventing Western countries of their bloc, their own Soviet allies, from knowing what is happening. Soviet Union was our version of melting pot, and Chernobyl was doing it literally. The fire from the reactor formed a radioactive cloud that mostly swept over Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, Poland, Sweden, and Norway even. Due to spring weather conditions, the radiation was scattered irregularly over Europe. Soviets tried to seed rain using special planes to remove radioactive particles from clouds, heading towards highly populated areas, especially Moscow. They seeded rain over 10,000 square kilometers, 3,900 square miles of the Belarusian SSR. A radioactive black rain was registered in city of Gomel, Belarus, that is 150 kilometers, 96 miles from the plant. Despite all this, as you already know, they didn't cancel the 1st of May parade in Kiev. There were 4 most harmful radioactive isotopes, radionuclides, spread from Chernobyl's explosion. Iodine-131, that has a half-life of only 8 days, Cesium-134, 2 years, Cesium-137, 30 years, Strontium-90, 28 years. But it was the Iodine-131 that was regarded as immediate threat. This element is highly volatile and travels the furthest. It is easily absorbed through air and accumulates in humans' thyroid glands and cows' milk glands, being a risk of developing thyroid cancer. Some countries, like Poland, tried to prevent absorption of iodine-131 by administering Lugol's iodine to children, but since Soviets withheld information about event even from their own allies, it was probably way too late for that. The radioactive iodine was the first to accumulate in thyroid glands. Iodine-131 and Cesium-137 are the most volatile elements from the meltdown, and both of them were found, for example, in milk. The doses of radiation received by people via respiratory tract in the zone are calculated to be between 3 to 150 millisieverts. To imagine it, 2 to 3 CAT scans of 90 millisieverts are proven cancerous. That, my dear comrades, was part 1 of our glowing show about Chernobyl. What happened after, you'll learn in part 2, where we'll talk about radiation sickness, plants and animals from the zone. Do there live any scary mutants? This and many more interesting facts from 1986 until today. Thank you very many for your attention. Stay tuned, be a good stalker, and subscribe to our zone. Bye.
Внимание, внимание! Внимание, внимание! Внимание, внимание! Уважаемые товарищи! Городской совет народных депутатов сообщает, что в связи с аварией на Чернобыльской атомной электростанции в городе Припяти складывается неблагоприятная радиационная обстановка. Партийными и советскими органами, воинскими частями принимаются необходимые меры. Однако, с целью обеспечения полной безопасности людей и в первую очередь детей возникает необходимость провести временную эвакуацию жителей города в пункты Киевской области. Для этого каждому жилому дому сегодня 27 апреля, начиная с 14:00 часов, будут поданы автобусы в сопровождении работников милиции и представителей горисполкома. Рекомендуется с собой взять документы, крайне необходимые вещи, а также, на первый случай, продукты питания. Руководителями предприятий и учреждений определен круг работников, которые остаются на месте для обеспечения нормального функционирования города. Все жилые дома на период эвакуации будут охраняться работниками милиции. Товарищи, временно оставляя свое жилье, не забудьте, пожалуйста, закрыть окна, выключить электрические и газовые приборы, перекрыть водопроводные краны. Просим соблюдать спокойствие, организованность и порядок при проведении временной эвакуации.